Control access to objects. After completing this unit, you will be able to view existing profiles and create new ones, modify access to objects using profiles, view all assigned users in a profile, create new permission sets, assign permission sets to single and multiple users, manage object permissions. The simplest way to control data access is to set permissions on a particular type of object. An object is a collection of records like leads or contacts. You can control whether a group of users can create, view, edit, or delete any records of that object. You can set object permissions with profiles or permission sets. A user can have one profile and many permission sets. A user's profile determines the object they can access and the thing they can do with any object record, such as create, read, edit, or delete. Permission sets grant additional permissions and access settings to a user. Use profiles to grant the minimum permissions and settings that all users of a particular type need. Then use permission sets to grant more permissions as needed. The combination of profiles and permission sets gives you a great deal of flexibility in a specific object's level access. Object permissions for the recruiting app. As an example, let's explore how you might configure object level access in the recruiting app. The app has four main types of users: hiring managers, recruiters, interviewers, and standard employees. What kind of access to objects does each type of user need? Hiring managers. Ben, a hiring manager, should be able to access the recruiting records related to his open positions, but should have access to other recruiting records unless they are owned by other hiring managers who report to him. Also, there are certain sensitive fields that he has no need to see, like the social security number field. Let's consider the permissions Ben needs for each of the key custom objects in the app. Position. Ben should be able to post new positions as well as updates and view all fields for positions for which he is the hiring manager, but he should only be able to view other managers' positions. Candidate. Ben should only be able to view those candidates who have applied for a position on which he is the hiring manager. Also, since Ben has no reason to see a candidate's social security number, this field should be restricted from his view. Job application. Ben needs to be able to update the status of job applications to specify which candidates should be selected or rejected. However, he should not be able to change the candidate list on the job application, nor the position for which the candidate is applying, so we'll have to find a way of preventing Ben from updating the lookup fields on job applications. Review. To make a decision about the candidates who are applying, Ben needs to see the reviews posted by the interviewer, as well as make comments on them if he thinks the interviewer was being too biased in his or her view. Likewise, Ben needs to be able to create reviews so that he can remember his own impressions of the candidates he interviews. Recruiters. Mario, a recruiter, needs to be able to create, view, and modify any position, candidate, job application, or review that in the system. He also needs to view and modify the recruiting records that all of the other recruiters own, since all of the recruiters work together to fill each position, regardless of who creates it. We need to make sure a recruiter will never accidentally delete a record with information about a candidate. That's because state and federal laws require recruitment-related fields to be saved for a number of years, so that if a hiring decision is questioned, it can be defended in court. Interviewers. Melissa is an engineer who interviews candidates for highly technical positions. She should be able to view only the candidates and job application to which she is assigned to as an interviewer. Also, she shouldn't be able to view the minimum and maximum salary values for any of the positions or the social security number of any candidates, as that's sensitive information that's nothing to do with her job. Standard employees. Employees such as Harry are often the best resources for recruiting new hires, even if they are not active hiring managers or interviewers. For this reason, we need to make sure that employees can view open positions, but they can't see the values for the position's minimum and maximum salary field, otherwise they might tip off friends to negotiate for a position's maximum salary value. Harry shouldn't be able to view any other records in the recruiting app. Here are the required permissions for each of the 4 types of users. Custom object, position, candidate, job application, review. And then the permission, recreate, edit. And what the hiring manager is able to see for each field, what the interviewer is able to see, and what the standard employee is able to see, and of course also do, like edit. Only for those records that are associated with the position to which the hiring manager or interviewer has been assigned. Only for those records that the interviewer owns. Okay. And we are a bit smarter. In the rest of the module, you will learn how you can use the platform to implement these rules in the recruiting app. As you will see, this will require configuring security controls at all 3 levels: objects, fields, and records. Use profiles to restrict access. Each user has a single profile that controls which data and features that the user has access to. A profile is a collection of settings and permissions. Profile settings determine which data the user can see, and permissions determine what the user can do with that data. The settings in the user profile determine whether she can see a particular app, tab, field, or record type. The permissions in the user's profile determine whether she can create or edit records of a given type, run reports, or customize the app. Profiles usually match up with the user's job function, for example, system administrator, recruiter, or hiring manager. But you can have profiles for anything that makes sense for your Salesforce org. A profile can be assigned to many users, but a user can only have one profile at a time. Standard profiles. The platform includes a set of standard profiles. For example, our read-only, standard user, marketing user, contract manager, system administrator. Each standard profile includes a default set of permissions for all standard objects available on the platform. For example, a standard user can create and edit records, while a read-only user can view records but not create or edit them. The system administrator profile has the widest access of data and the greatest ability to configure and customize Salesforce. The system administrator profile also includes 2 special permissions: view all data and modify data. These permissions can override all the other sharing settings, so use caution when assigning them to any profile other than the system administrator. You can view a list of standard and custom profiles in Setup. You can't edit the object permissions on a standard profile. However, you can clone any existing profile and use that as a basis for a new profile, adjusting the apps and system settings as needed. For example, in the recruiting app, you might create 3 new profiles, one for each recruiter, interviewer, and hiring manager. Each profile can then be configured to provide the specific type of data access required for a particular role. You can then use permission sets to grant additional permissions as required. Note, the profile's functionality in any org depends on the user's license type. Managing profiles. The profile overview page provides an entry point for all of the settings and permissions for a single profile. In Setup, use the quick find box in the profiles and click the profile you want to view. Create a profile. The easiest way to create a profile is cloning an existing profile that's similar to the one you want to create and then modify it. Salesforce has an enhanced profile user interface that makes it easy to find and modify profile settings. That's what we'll use for this exercise. To do that, find the user management settings in the quick find box and Setup, then enable Enhanced Profile User Interface. Let's just do this real quick. profiles here. So these are custom profiles. Let's see if this is already selected, user management settings, and then enable enhanced profile user interface. Yeah, it's already enabled. I don't really see any kind of option to clone here. This is locked. Oh, there we go, clone. Assign a profile. Once you have created a profile, you will want to customize it to match the needs of a set of users and then assign the profile to those users. Find the profiles in Setup, select the profile and then click Edit. We are already there. Set the most restrictive settings and permissions so you can use them for this user and save. There is a lot to choose from, so I wouldn't even know where to start. If you really want to get to it, I guess reach, access, or removing all of this would be the most restrictive one. Don't worry about blocking the user from doing things they need to do. We'll open up more possibilities for them later when we give them permission sets. Find users in setup and click edit next to one of them. On the profile drop down, select the profile you just set up and save. I'll just leave it like this. Use permission sets to grant access. A permission set is a collection of settings and permissions that give users access to various tools and functions. Settings and permission set also find profiles, but permission sets extend the user's functional access without changing their profile. Permission sets make it easy to grant access to the various apps and custom objects in your org, and to take away access when it's no longer needed. Users can have only one profile, but they can have multiple permission sets. You'll be using permission sets for general purposes, to grant access to custom objects or apps, and to grant permissions temporarily or long-term to specific fields. Grant access to custom objects or apps. Let's say you have many users in your org with the same fundamental job functions. You can assign them to all one profile that grants them all the access they need to do their job. But a few of those users are working on special projects and they need access to an app no one else uses, and a few other users need access to that app as well as another app that the first group doesn't need. If we only had profiles, you would have to create more profiles customized to your users' needs, or take your chances and add more access to the original profile, making the apps available to users that don't need them. Neither of these options are ideal, especially if your org is growing and your users need changes regularly. Grant permissions to specific fields. Let's say you have a user, Tom, who needs temporary edit access to a field while his coworker is on vacation. You can create a permission set that grants access to the field and assigns the permission set to Tom. When Tom, the coworker, returns from vacation and Tom no longer needs access to the field, you can just remove the permission set assigned from Tom's user's records. Note, if a user has a permission in their profile, you can't remove it by assigning a permission set to that user. A permission can only add permission. To take away a permission, you have to remove it from the user's base profile and from any permission set the users have. Managing permission sets. A permission sets overview page is the entry point for all the permissions in a permission set. To open the permission set overview page, find the permission sets in Setup. Then select the permission set you want to view. In each permission set, permission and settings are organized into app settings, system settings, object permissions, and field permissions. So let's have a look here. Let's firstly maybe create a profile that is like really super basic, not the cloned one, but basically like one without any kind of rights, I guess. Or maybe we just leave the cloned sales profile and just continue here for sake of ease. I have some specific exercise down there anyway, so I don't think we need to bother creating a new one. Okay, let's go to permission sets. Use permission sets to grant access. A permission set is a collection of settings and permissions that give users access to various tools and functions. The settings and permission in permission sets are also found in profiles, but permission sets extend users' functional access without changing their profiles. A permission set makes it easy to grant access to the various apps and custom objects in your org and to take away access when it's no longer needed. Users can use only one profile, but they can have multiple permission sets. You'll be using permission sets for two general purposes: to grant access to custom objects or apps, and to grant permissions temporarily or long-term to specific fields. Grant access to custom objects or apps. Let's say you have many users in your org with the same fundamental job function. You can assign them all to one profile that grants them all the access they need to do their job. But a few of those users are working on a special project and they need access to an app no one else uses. And a few other users need access to that app, as well as another app that the first group doesn't need. If we only had profiles, you would have to create more profiles customized to those few users' needs, or you take your chances and add more access to the original profile, making the apps available to users that don't need them. Neither of these options are ideal, especially if your org is growing and your users' needs change regularly. Grant permissions to specific fields. Let's say you have a user, Tom, who needs temporary edit access to a field while his coworker is on vacation. You can create a permission set that grants access to the field and assigns the permission set to Tom. When Tom's coworker returns from the vacation, Tom no longer needs access to the field, and you just remove the permission set assigned from Tom's users record. Note, if a user has a permission in their base profile, you can't remove it by assigning a permission set to that user. A permission set can only add permissions. To take away a permission, you have to remove it from the user's base profile and from any permission set the users may have. Managing permission sets. A permission set overview page is the entry point for all of the permissions in a permission set. To open the permission set overview page, find permission sets in setup, and then select the permission set you want to view. In each permission set, permissions and settings are organized into app settings, system settings, object settings, and field permissions. Let's have a look there. So this is like a standard permission set. The Sales Cloud user, I guess we see like the sales view that we have seen before a couple of times. This one. So you can see the settings here: permission, flow access, custom metadata types, custom setting definitions. I think this would be the most relevant settings, but let's continue to read here. Create a permission set. Create a permission set to grant additional permissions to specific users on top of the existing profile permissions without having to modify existing profiles, create new profiles, or grant an administrator profile. Use a quick find box to find permission sets in setup. Click clone next to the set you want to copy. So let's just clone something. I can only clone this one. Oh no, we can't. These we can clone as well, but these are standard ones, so we can't delete them. I just clone the Sales Cloud user. Note the cloud permission set has the same user license as the original. To create a set with a different license, click New instead. Enter label and description. The API is a unique name used by the API and managed packages. It automatically replicates the label, but you can modify it. If this is a new permission set, select the user license option. If you plan to assign this permission set to multiple users with different licenses, select None. If only users with one type of license will use the permission set, select that user's license. Click Save to go back to the permission set overview page. In the permission set toolbar, click Manage Assignment and click Add Assignment. Select the users to assign to this permission set and click Assign. So let's just do this. Manage assignments. Add assignment. And let's just choose John Doe. I created earlier. And there we have it. Profiles and permission sets for the recruiting app. Now that you have seen how to create and modify profiles and permission sets, let's set up the appropriate object level access for our recruiting app. The app has 4 main types of users: recruiters, hiring managers, interviewers, and standard employees. Here are the key considerations for deciding whether to create a profile or permission set for each user type. Recruiters. These represent a clearly defined job function and they need access to different types of data than other users. Hence, it makes sense to create a profile for recruiters. Hiring managers. For most org, a hiring manager in sales will need access to a different type of data than hiring managers in engineering. However, all hiring managers still need the same type of access to recruiting data, reviews, candidates, position, and job application. Hence, it's convenient to create a hiring manager permission set that can assign to various types of users. Interviewers. An employee from any department and in any job function might be called upon to perform an interview and requires access to recruiting information only for a limited amount of time. It makes sense to define a permission set for interviewers since permissions can be easily assigned and revoked as needed. Standard employees. This is a generic group that doesn't reflect a particular job function. For most employees, you can create a base profile that provides access to a small set of data and then, depending on what their specialties are, create and assign permission sets to give them more access as needed. So from what we have seen, the optimal way to configure object permissions for the recruiting app is create 2 profiles, recruiters and standard employee, create 2 permission sets, hiring manager and interviewers. Assign the standard employee profile to hiring managers and interviewers and then grant the appropriate permission set for their function. Hands-on challenge. Create a cleaner profile. Your company is going through a data cleanup project and you have assigned a consultant to help you. You want the consultant to have read-only access to most objects, but only have edit access to accounts, contacts, and leads. You don't want the consultant to delete anything or to create new records. Challenge requirements. Clone the read-only profile with the following settings on. You use existing profile, read-only, profile name cleaner. So let's do that. Where do we have read-only? Quite a few here. And then we clone it. Profile name, cleaner. object permissions account, read edit. Okay, I'm not really sure how we can change it. I'm having a look here. We go to edit, we can do that. Read and edit. Contacts also edit. Leads, read, edit. And everything else is supposed to be as is. So let's see if we have successfully completed the challenge. And we have, so let's tackle the next unit.